Have you ever stopped to really think about how we know the stories of people who lived thousands of years ago? I mean, really know them? This was before writing, before books, before pretty much anything we use to record our own lives. It's a huge mystery. So let's dive in and see if we can solve it.
Just look at these. On the one hand, you've got a cave painting from France that just feels alive, doesn't it? And on the other, the absolutely mind-blowing scale of the Great Wall of China. Now, thousands of years separate these two, but they've got one thing in common. They are powerful, silent messages from our ancestors. And that right there, that's the big question, isn't it? With no written records to guide us, how on earth do we piece together their lives, their beliefs, their struggles? How do we take these faint echoes from the past and turn them into a story that makes sense? Well, we're about to become historical detectives, and we're gonna find out. All right, first things first, in any good investigation, we need to define the time period we're digging into and, set some boundaries for our search. The official term for this era is prehistory. It's a simple idea, but it's absolutely crucial. It's basically the entire chunk of the human story that happened before we started writing stuff down. This is the time of silent clues and forgotten voices. And to give you a sense of just how long we're talking about, get this. We have evidence of people living in places like Brittany in France about 12,000 years ago. Just let that sink in. A huge, sprawling stretch of time that we have to investigate without a single written word to help us. Okay, so if there's no writing, how in the world do we even start? What are the tools for a job this big? Well, it turns out there are experts who are masters at solving this exact kind of ancient puzzle.
So what's the master key to unlocking this whole era? It's a field called archaeology. This is the science of sifting through the physical stuff people left behind and carefully, piece by piece, bringing their stories back to life.
So, how does it actually work? Well, you can kind of break their process down into three main steps. First, you've got to locate the ancient sites. Then, you carefully uncover the physical evidence. And finally, you take all those clues and you reconstruct the story. It's a bit like putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle, only half the pieces are missing and there's no picture on the box. And what does this evidence look like? Well, it can be something monumental, like the massive stone circles that still dot the landscape. It could be the foundations of old temples. Or it could be something much more personal, like the tools they made from iron. Or even just subtle traces in the soil that show where different tribes once lived. Think of it this way. Each object is like a word in a lost language. Okay, so that's the theory. But let's see how this all comes together in the real world. We're going to zoom in on a specific case study to see how archaeologists can take all these clues and build a real, compelling story from the deep past. Let's look at ancient Brittany. And the story they've pieced together is just incredible. Around 12,000 years ago, the evidence shows us Celtic tribes living as hunters and gatherers, constantly on the move. But then, fast forward 8,000 years and the whole picture changes. Around 4,000 years ago, people started to settle down, to farm the land and raise animals. And this shift, it's a total game changer. It's the beginning of society as we know it. Villages, towns, new skills. Then you get the Iron Age with even better tools. You're literally watching human society evolve, all read from stuff they left in the ground.
This quote just sums it all up so perfectly. It really gets to the heart of the challenge and the wonder of prehistory. These were people with complex cultures, deep beliefs, and amazing oral traditions. But because they didn't write, their entire world of stories only existed in what they could remember and pass down from one person to the next.
So, we've seen how archaeologists build a story, but telling that story requires another really important tool, one we all use every day: language itself. The words we use to talk about the past are just as critical as the evidence we find. Precision really matters. For example, think about the difference between history and a story. History is, well, it's everything that happened. All of it, the raw data of the past. But a story is the narrative we create from that data to make sense of it all. So you could say that archaeologists uncover evidence of history, and then they construct a story from it. Here's another pair that trips people up all the time. Historic versus historical. They sound almost the same, right? But a historic event is something big, important, a real turning point. Historical, on the other hand, just means it's connected to the study of the past, like a historical novel or a historical document. See? The words we choose really frame how we see what came before. So we've taken this incredible journey back in time, learning how to listen to these faint echoes from our ancestors. But this investigation doesn't just stop in the past. In a way, it continues with us.
Because all that stuff we talked about, the tools, the monuments, the traces of ancient life, it hasn't all disappeared. The clues to our shared story aren't just buried in some far-off field. So many of them have been carefully preserved and are waiting for you in museums. They're like these local doorways into the deep past.
Which brings us to a final thought. This work of understanding our past is a journey we can all be a part of. So I'll leave you with this question. Have you ever been to a museum and found something that just completely fascinated you? What was that one object that told you a whole story without using a single word? The investigation is now in your hands.